The first thing the man did upon returning to the day before the apocalypse was slaughter all the cows on his family's farm. Those cows were the Zhou family's main source of income. The neighbors who saw it were shocked, whispering that he had gone insane. His ex-girlfriend was nearby, mocking him, saying that even if he managed to sell all those cows, she still wouldn't marry him. Besides, she already found herself a rich boyfriend to take over. Before she could finish, Zhu snapped, "Get lost. Don't waste my time. I've got cows to kill." That's when Zhao's parents showed up. Panicking, his father shouted, "What the hell is going on? If something's wrong, talk to us. How are we supposed to live if you slaughter all our cattle?" The moment Zhou heard his father's voice, he froze. The machete slipped from his hand and hit the ground. He ran and hugged them tightly. His voice trembled. "It's so good to see you again. This time, I swear I'll protect you, no matter what it takes." His parents looked at him, completely confused by his strange behavior. But Zhou didn't stop. He said, "There's no time to explain. You just need to trust me. We have to kill all the cattle now and sell the meat. Every minute counts." His father looked into his son's eyes, hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "All right, I trust you." After all, their son was the only one in the village with a college degree. If he was being this serious, it must be because he knew something they didn't. His mother let out a deep sigh, rolled up her sleeves, and silently joined the slaughter. The onlookers stared in disbelief. The whole family's gone mad, haven't they? Zhou checked the time. Only a few hours remained before everything fell apart. He turned to the crowd and shouted, "I need 3 guys to help me slaughter the cattle. $800 for each one." The idle men nearby lit up immediately, pushing and shouting to claim the cash quickly. Zhou called the local butcher and sold all the meat at half price, under one condition: cash only and fast. His parents watched in silence, heartbroken, as the cows they had raised for years were turned into meat and money in just a few hours. But Zhou didn't stop to explain. He stuffed the money into his pocket and said, "I have to go to the city." Before leaving, he looked back and said firmly, "Stay inside. No matter what you hear, don't open the gate. Wait for me." Then he jumped into the pickup truck and sped down the dirt road. Zhou then said there were 2 hours left before the apocalypse began. First, the animals would turn wild and attack anything in sight. And after that, humans would start showing the same symptom. Also, anyone who got injured or bitten by a zombie would end up turning into one too. After a month, half the world would be infected, and within a year, only a few million survivors would remain. In his past life, he had lost his family to that sudden disaster. But even if he didn't know the reason for his reincarnation, he wasn't going to let it happen again. So he bought everything he could find for self-defense. Then he stopped by the pharmacy and cleared out all the emergency supplies from the shelves. But one thing was still missing. More than anything, Zhou needed gunpowder. He knew that at the start of the apocalypse, those with firepower would have control. He took the rest of the money and went to a pharmacy that on the surface sold fireworks, but behind closed doors dealt with illegal gunpowder. The catch: the owner was none other than Lin Ji, the guy who stole his girlfriend. Zhou walked in and threw the money bag on the counter. Lin Ji raised an eyebrow and laughed. "Well, look who's back. Still hung up on that girl?" Zhou didn't even blink. "I'm here for business. How much gunpowder do you have left? I want all of it." Lin Ji's smile faded, his tone shifted. "We're a legit business now. We don't deal in anything illegal." Zhou smirked slightly. "You sure about that? Because last year, a woman in a blue coat showed up near the mountain out back. Want me to dig her up and ask what's really going on here?" Lin Ji's face turned pale, beads of sweat forming on his forehead. After a long silence, he turned to the woman beside him. It was Lin Ji who said, "Take him to the warehouse." After Zhu left, Lin Ji leaned back, letting out a cold laugh. "So someone really knows about our little secret." His eyes narrowed with malice. "In that case, I don't think he'll last long." Zhou returned home with the supplies and quickly called his older brother to help unload. But he brought bad news. Their younger sister, who studied in the city, still hadn't returned. Zhou froze. In the previous life, she would have already been home by now. Could his early actions have triggered a butterfly effect? There were only 30 minutes left before the outbreak began. Without another word, he jumped back into the truck and sped off toward the city. "Don't leave the house," he shouted as he drove off. "No matter what you hear, don't open the door until I get back." The tires screeched as he floored it, racing toward the school. He knew most of the infections on day 1 began with animals, but schools were full of people, and once the virus hit, chaos would break out. Suddenly, the truck jolted violently, as if it had run over something. Zhou slammed the brakes and jumped out to check. A mutant dog lay on the ground, writhing in pain. Blood-red eyes, fangs dripping thick black slime. The outbreak had already begun. Meanwhile, the news that Zhou had slaughtered the cattle had already gone viral. At Qinshan Elementary School, his younger sister Zhu Ying was immediately nicknamed the school freak. In the classroom, Xiao Ya saw Zhou Ying staying quiet and got bolder with every word. Waving her phone, she mocked, "Your whole family's insane. Your college brother killed all the cows just to marry a hillbilly. Pathetic. Zhou Ying snapped, slammed her desk, and sent Xiaoya's phone flying out of her hand. Just then, the teacher walked in, saw the mess, and silently confiscated the phone. After class, while Zhou Ying was cleaning the room, Xiaoya ambushed her, shoved her to the floor, and pulled out a box cutter. "You broke my phone, freak. Now you're gonna pay." But before she could do anything, her body started convulsing violently. A jet of black blood burst from her mouth, and she collapsed on the floor, choking and vomiting uncontrollably. Zhou Ying screamed and ran down the hallway in a panic. The entire school had already descended into chaos. Cries of pain, pleas for help, and sounds of pure horror echoed through every corridor. Zhou Ying barely had time to process what was happening. A zombified classmate, with bulging eyes and a torn mouth, lunged at her. She fell to the floor, paralyzed with fear. The zombie missed its strike and slammed face first into the ground with a sickening thud. At that moment, Xiao Ya staggered out of the classroom, now completely transformed. Her body was twisted unnaturally, with a grotesque smile stretched across her face. She screamed and charged straight at Zhu Ying. But just before impact, Zhu arrived in time and delivered a flying kick that sent Xiao Ya flying down the hallway, crashing through a window. The other zombie got back up, and Zhu didn't hesitate. He drew his short blade in one swift motion. The zombie's head hit the ground before its body did. Zhou turned and saw his little sister, Zhu Ying, trembling and crying. Trying to lighten the mood, he teased, "Oh, sweetheart, I could hear you screaming from the next city over." At another point, they were in a car and saw a zombie devouring a woman. But without much thought, the protagonist immediately ran the zombie over. Zhou Ying forced a shaky smile and said, "That was intense. Are we sure we're not in a horror movie? Damn." Zhou looked at her and saw right through the facade. He spoke calmly. "It's okay to cry, you know. The world's changed and we'll have to learn to live with it. Mom, Dad, and our big brother are home and safe." Zhou Ying managed a faint smile, but back at the village, under the illusion of peace, danger was already forming. When they arrived and confirmed everyone was okay, Zhou nodded. "I need to find someone," he said quietly. His mother began to protest, but Zhu Ying stepped in. "Let him go," she said with a calm and steady voice. The girl who had just run for her life now saw everything with clarity. Her brother was no longer the same man he used to be. Zhao felt something awakening inside him, a strange, pulsing power rising from the chaos within. It was raw, untamed, but full of potential. His thoughts turned to a figure from a past life, a lone warrior who moved through zombie hordes like a phantom. If he could find this man in this life, he'd be a valuable ally. Meanwhile, in the village committee building, Xiao Xie was leaning against the door with all her strength. She still believed the villagers were just panicking, not understanding the seriousness of the threat. A large bluish-gray hand suddenly smashed through the wooden door. Seconds later, blood-covered zombies stormed in, growling and clawing. The village officials were paralyzed with fear, completely overwhelmed. When all seemed lost, the window shattered, and Zhu jumped in, his blade gleaming in a blur of motion. The zombies fell one by one. He rushed to Xiao Xie, gently held her face, and checked for any signs of infection. Only when he saw no blood or bite marks did he breathe a sigh of relief. This was the woman who, in his past life, had been cold, authoritarian, and almost untouchable, but now she looked fragile, almost human. At that moment, the man with glasses shouted, "Why did you kill them? They were our neighbors, people we lived with for years." Zhou took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "They're not human anymore. One bite or even a drop of infected blood, that's all it takes. They're zombies now." The man adjusted his glasses, his voice buzzing. "Zombies? That was old Zong. He was only looking for his missing granddaughter. We should call the police. Let the authorities handle this." At that moment, Lin Jin came out of the back room, clapping slowly with a smug smile. "Wow, the hero's here, huh? What's next? Gonna say the government's behind it all?" He mocked. "Zombies? Come on, you've watched too many movies." The mocking tone fueled the panic into rage. Some began shouting that Zhou should be tied up and handed to the police. Just as chaos was about to erupt, Xiao Xie stepped forward and yelled, "Enough. Zhou just saved our lives. Believe what you want." But those villagers were no longer acting like humans. Zhou looked at Xiao Xie with gratitude, then spoke firmly. "If you still don't believe me, I can show you the truth. Let's go to the forest behind the mountain." Lin Ji, eyes narrowing, had already noticed Zhao's strange behavior in the city, stocking up on weapons and supplies. Now he was almost sure this guy knew something. "If Zhao has anything that could expose me," thought Lin Ji coldly, "then he has to die, no matter the cost." With a fake smile, he gathered some thugs and said he'd come along, just to be safe. Xiao Xie and the man with glasses, Huang, also volunteered. She was worried about the villagers, and Huang still hadn't heard anything about his missing wife. The village chief had gone out earlier that day to investigate the disappearances and hadn't returned. When the group arrived at the back mountain, they soon found the chief's abandoned vehicle parked near the forest. Zhou touched the hood. "It's still warm." He didn't leave long ago, he murmured, eyes narrowing. Fragments of memory from his past life began to fall into place. If everything happened the same way, this forest could be ground zero of the first zombie outbreak. But even after searching the whole mountain, the group found nothing. Until Zhou noticed a cave entrance hidden among the rocks. The ground was stained with blood, and the air reeked of rot. Everything indicated zombies had passed through there. I'm going in to check, said Zhou emotionlessly. Lin Ji immediately mocked him, throwing provocations. Or maybe you just want to go in there to destroy the evidence. What? Gonna hide your little crime scene in there, Zhou? He looked at him coldly. If you're scared, stay here. Otherwise, follow me and shut up. Just as Zhou was about to enter the cave, a figure emerged from the shadows. Wang shouted with joy. It was his missing wife. He rushed forward with open arms, but in the very next second, Sin bared her teeth and lunged straight at his throat. Don't touch her. Zhou moved in a blink, plunging the blade between her jaws without hesitation. He drove the blade deep and killed her, then turned to look at Huang. The man let out a broken scream and swung at him with a wooden bat. You killed her. You murdered my wife. But Zhou quickly knocked him to the ground and stayed calm. His voice was low and heady. I know you're in pain, but Sin was already gone. I'm trying to keep the rest of us alive. Huang staggered back to his feet. His voice cracked with pain and rage. Easy for you to say. What if I killed your family right in front of you? Could you stay calm then? The words hit Chu like a slap. His mind flashed back to his past life, to the bodies of loved ones lying cold and bloody. He held his breath, then with a growl grabbed Huang and lifted him into the air as if he weighed nothing. His eyes sharpened like blades. In this life, no one threatens my family and gets away with it. He raised his blade, but before he could strike, Lin Ji's voice cut in from the side with a mocking laugh. Well, look at you. Maybe you're not so different from the monsters after all. In that instant, a strong hand struck Zhao's wrist, stopping the blow and throwing him to the ground. A familiar voice growled, "Wake up, idiot." Standing over him, with a serious and firmer face, was his older brother Zhou Ming. Zhou Ming stared at Huang, who was still lost in the grief of losing his wife. Suddenly, he shouted, "Man, did you see what she turned into? Nobody wanted this. If you need someone to blame, blame me. Her death is my fault too. But now you need to pull yourself together. You're the village leader. Damn it. These people still need you." Huang trembled, clenched his fists, and finally gave a slow, broken nod. The tension finally broke, just as a weak cry echoed from the cave. "Help, someone help me." It was the voice of the village chief. But Zhu froze, frowning. Something was off. The tone was too controlled, too human. One of Lin Ji's thugs rolled his eyes and mocked. "What a bunch of cowards. I'll drag him out myself." That said, he entered the cave. He didn't get far. A wet slicing sound tore through the silence. His torso was cleanly severed at the waist. Blood sprayed everywhere. A grotesque zombie dragged the upper half of his body and tossed it aside like trash. Behind it, hundreds of glowing red eyes lit up in the darkness. A horde had awakened. What Zhu saw was beyond anything he had imagined. The number of undead pouring from the cave was absurd. Even if he managed to fight his way out, how could he protect Zhu Yang and his brother at the same time? Luckily, the Zhou brothers had trained since childhood with a military martial arts master. Their skills were elite, comparable to professional fighters. Aim for the head, they're sensitive to direct light, Zhou warned. The brothers moved in perfect sync, slashing and dodging, clearing the area around them in minutes. Meanwhile, Lin Ji had already hidden behind a tree, too scared to even breathe. From deep within the cave, that same strange cry for help echoed again. Zhou and Zhou Ming exchanged looks. "You two go back," Zhou said firmly. "From here on, it's too dangerous. You'll only get in the way." And after a brief discussion about what they should do, they left. Zhou thought to himself that he couldn't let anyone else die, and hoped they could deal with the source of the horde that would erupt in a few days. Thus declaring that he would leave the rest to them, the two stepped into the darkness. It didn't take long before Zhou was suddenly interrupted. There was a body ahead, dry like a husk, and the heart completely missing. That same voice called again, whispering unnaturally through the air. Zhou Ming raised the flashlight and swept the cave with its beam. Sitting with his back to them was the village chief, still and silent. Then he turned with a jolt, pale face, empty eyes, and from his chest, tentacles began to uncoil. The creature lunged at terrifying speed. Zhao reacted instinctively, striking its head with his blade. The moment the blade hit, he knew something was wrong. It barely moved. This wasn't a regular zombie. It was a mutant. In the next instant, the tentacles whipped and hurled Zhu against the cave wall. The beam of Zhou Ming's flashlight lit up the creature's face, and it recoiled violently from the light. They seized the moment and ran out of the cave. Gasping for air, Zhou Ming turned to his brother, stunned. What the hell was that? Zhao exhaled slowly. I think we're dealing with cross-species infection. Some kind of genetic recombination between humans and animals. This isn't just another undead. It evolved. He nodded toward the dark mine opening. My guess is there's a nest of mutant bats in there. And that thing was a second stage variant, probably the former village chief. Zhou looked up at the full moon. Good thing it's bright tonight. These things fear the light. They don't come out easily. Zhou Ming stared in disbelief. Since when are you a virologist, Zhou? He shrugged, half smiling. Maybe I watched too many documentaries before the world ended. They were about to head back, planning to return the next day with the proper gear to deal with the mutant, when suddenly a swarm of glowing red eyes burst from the cave. It was a horde of mutant bats. The sky darkened in an instant, the moonlight swallowed by wings. Taking advantage of the chaos, the mutant zombie launched itself like a missile, striking Zhou Ming with a brutal blow and hurling him far away. One of the tentacles whipped out, destroying Zhu's lantern. The creature's intent was clear. It had chosen Zhou Ming as its target. Zhou gritted his teeth and pulled with all his strength, but it was useless. The monster's power was overwhelming, far beyond what any human could resist. As the creature's jaws were about to close around Zhou Ming's hand, Zhu froze in horror, helpless. Then, out of nowhere, a car came speeding in. The door swung open with force, and at the wheel was Xiao Exia. Without hesitation, she aimed and rammed the mutant zombie, throwing it far. Zhao didn't miss the chance. He charged forward and landed the final blow, putting an end to the creature's life. What they realized after, it was the village chief. Xiao Exia was visibly shaken. Zhou Ming exhaled deeply, his voice tired but sincere. If you hadn't shown up when you did, we'd both be dead meat. But before they could catch their breath, Zhao's face turned pale. He had seen a clear bite mark on Zhou Ming's forearm. Zhou Ming gave a faint, weary smile. Sorry, little bro. Now you're gonna have to take care of the family. As for what comes next, I don't need to say it, do I? Those words cut through Zhu like a blade, because deep down, he already knew he would have to be the one to end his brother's suffering. Facing his infected brother, Zhu was consumed by guilt. He had believed being reborn gave him a chance to change fate, to protect his family. So why was the story repeating itself? Suddenly, his eyes locked onto the mutant's corpse. He ran over and pulled the blade from the creature's skull. Then he began cutting the head again and again, without stopping, blood splashing everywhere. Zhou Ming, thinking his brother had gone mad from grief, shouted, "What are you doing? Stop that." Xiao Exia also screamed, trying to pull him back. But Zhou didn't stop because something had just occurred to him. He remembered that high-level zombies absorb life energy from the weaker ones and condense it into a crystallized core, hidden deep in the skull. Moments later, he found it, a dark blood-colored crystal lodged in the back of the creature's brain. He turned to Zhou Ming, his voice firm, eyes full of hope. "You haven't turned yet. We still have time." And with that, he held out the crystal. Zhou spoke with a heavy voice. "This is a zombie core, formed from concentrated viral matter. It comes from the same source as what's inside your body. If you take this, there's a chance you could evolve into an immune and enhanced type. But there's also a chance you'll turn into one of those monsters." Zhou Ming barely glanced at it before swallowing it whole, without hesitation. Zhao hesitated, but deep down, he knew it was their only chance. After swallowing, Zhou Ming smiled seriously. "You had that the whole time. Could have spared me the drama, huh? So when does it kick in?" Zhou answered bluntly. "In 2 days." Zhou Ming nodded, looking toward the cave. 2 days. Got it. If I don't come out by then, seal the entrance, all right? But if I come out with superpowers, better not get jealous. Watching his brother walk away so naturally, Zhou finally felt the weight in his chest lift just a bit. He believed in him. With a faint smile, he said, "I'll be waiting for you." Lin Ji had overheard the whole conversation. A sinister smile spread across his face. "So that's how it is. All right then, let me speed things up." The next morning at sunrise, Zhou Ying entered Zhao's room wearing a makeshift battle armor. "Bro, time to get up." Zhou turned his head and looked at her with a defeated expression. "What are you wearing? Looks like something out of a cheap sci-fi cosplay." Zhou Ying puffed out her chest proudly. "You said we needed to strengthen our defenses. I spent the whole night making this armor. Cool, right?" She waited for a compliment, but Zhou just stretched out a finger and poked the armor, sending Zhu Ying rolling out of the room like a barrel. Zhou stared blankly. "This is your armor? What are you gonna do when the zombies come? Roll over them to death?" Shaking his head, he stepped outside, only to see his father balancing on a ladder, stacking bricks to reinforce the yard wall. "Mr. Zhou," he called out. Zhao was finally awake. He jumped down from the wall, grabbed a barrel of black powder, and walked over with a huge grin. "Where'd you get that?" "Oh, come on, son. Your old man still keeps a few barrels around for fun." Zhou sighed beside him. "Dad, that's gunpowder, not a toy." But Mr. Zhao had already thrown the barrel over his shoulder and ran off, laughing. "Just one? You're so stingy." Seeing his father all excited, Zhu muttered, "Please don't blow up the house." Suddenly, a loud noise came from the backyard. No, his father hadn't blown himself up with a barrel of gunpowder. In fact, he turned around and saw his mother with frying pans strapped to her head, wielding a trident, standing firmly on a yoga roller, training with his little sister who was mimicking her moves. Zhou watched the scene and thought, definitely mother and daughter. Then he called out loudly, "Hey mom, is there breakfast today?" Without turning her head, she replied, "Make your own, I'm busy," and went back to perfecting her technique with the fork. Zhou sighed again, "I think I'll head out." Xiaoxia had been standing at Zhou's door for a while, about to ring the bell when the door opened from the inside. Zhou stepped out. "Surprised to see you here. What are you doing outside?" Xiaoxia lowered her head, hesitant, and then, as if gathering courage, looked up at him and said loudly, I need your help with something." Zhou blinked. "Help with what?" At that moment, his mother also appeared at the door. When she saw who it was, she smiled warmly. Xiaoxia gave a small polite nod. "Thank you, Monty, but I won't stay long. I came to speak with you." She turned to him, tone serious. "The village committee has started organizing the defenses. It's going well so far, but I contacted the county police station last night, and since then, nothing. No messages. And this morning, no signal at all." Zhou quickly checked his phone. No signal. He frowned. Strange, this didn't happen last time. Xiaoxia continued, her voice tense. "Something's not right. If we're isolated, we might miss something crucial, like reinforcements that could be on their way." She looked into his eyes. "Zhou, I need you to come with me to the county. We have to find out what's going on." Zhou fell silent, visibly worried about the request. Xiaoxia, noticing his hesitation, bowed deeply. "Sorry, I know your brother went through hell yesterday, and now I'm asking you to risk yourself again." She lifted her face, eyes resolute. "But I have to go to the county and find out what's happening. It's my responsibility, and you're the best fighter. I know that in that moment, you understood those creatures better than anyone." Zhou's mother stepped in and gently interrupted. "That's enough, Xiaoxia. If it weren't for you yesterday, my foolish son might not have even come back. See." Xiaoxia turned toward the voice. Surprised, Miss Zhou added, "What happened to me was his choice. Don't blame yourself." Xiaoxia, wait here a moment. Then she turned to her son. Come with me." Zhou looked at his mother and followed her inside. Inside, she quietly rummaged through an old wooden shelf without turning around. She spoke softly. "Your father and I are your parents. We shouldn't hold you back. We're here to protect you, not to weigh you down. Just look at you, all grown up and still making your little sister worry." With that, she pulled out a long blade wrapped in an old cloth. Time had aged it, but the blade still gleamed faintly. Zhou and Xiaoxia walked side by side toward the county, leaving the village behind. Zhou's mother stood quietly at the gate, watching until their figures disappeared into the distance. A faint smile appeared on her face as she murmured to herself, "Those two make quite a pair, don't they?" Meanwhile, deep in the cave, Zhou Ming remained motionless, waiting for his body to react to the zombie corpse he had just swallowed. Suddenly, he heard footsteps approaching. Thinking it was his brother, he opened his mouth. "Wait, don't come any closer yet." Then he felt something wet pass over his boots. With a serious expression, he dipped his finger in the liquid and brought it to his nose. The moment he smelled it, his expression changed. It was gasoline. Before he could react, a spark lit at the cave entrance. A deafening explosion erupted. Flames roared through the tunnel, and Zhou Ming was engulfed in fire in an instant. Meanwhile, Zhu and Xiaoxia were on the road toward the county in search of help. Xiaoxia sat in the passenger seat, nervously looking out the window and humming softly. Totally off-key, poor thing. Zhu glanced sideways and couldn't help but think, wow, she really has no musical talent. Noticing his look, Xiaoxia blushed slightly and murmured, "Sorry, I sing when I'm nervous." I know it sounds awful, but Zhou didn't laugh. In fact, he felt a strange warmth in his chest. She was clearly scared, but still kept going. Yeah, he thought, that's the Xiaoxia I know. With so many unexpected variables this time, he realized he couldn't rely solely on memories from his past life. He had to trust her sensitivity to zombies. That was something he needed to count on. Without warning, he said, "Xiaoxia, you should stay at my house." She froze, turning to him with slightly flushed cheeks. "Why would I do that?" she asked softly. Zhou didn't even notice the change in her tone. He was still deep in thought. If he told her about the powers she would have in the future, she would never believe him. So he simply said directly, "Because I need you to be safe. I can't afford to lose you." Just as Xiaoxia, still blushing, was about to ask what he meant by that, the road ahead was completely blocked by a landslide. They quickly got out of the car to check. Staring at the mountain of debris, Xiaoxia sighed in frustration. "There's no way we're getting to the county like this." Zhou didn't respond right away, but inside he was tense. "This road was fine in my past life. Something's changed. It's not just the timing, it's the entire path. If this route really is blocked, we'll have serious problems with future supply runs." He finally took a deep breath. "Let's go back to the village. We'll figure something out." Xiaoxia fell silent. On the way back, Zhou's mind was racing. They had enough supplies for now, but no signal, no escape. Everything felt like it was closing in. Suddenly, the car jolted violently and began to slide toward the edge of the bridge. Zhou slammed the brakes, gripping the steering wheel tightly. With a screech of the tires, the vehicle stopped just inches from falling. They both jumped out quickly to see what had happened. Xiaoxia looked down at the ground, her voice trembling. Is this it? Zhu's face darkened. Don't come closer. This is a strip of nails. Someone put this here on purpose. At that moment, a mocking voice echoed from above. Well, Zhu. Didn't take you long to cozy up with our lovely village chief, huh? Gotta admit, I'm impressed. They looked up and saw Lin Ji crouched on the railing, spinning a pistol between his fingers. Zhou's eyes filled with menace as he looked up coldly. What do you want, Lin Ji? What do I want? You wiped out half of my crew last night, remember? As their leader, I can't just let that slide, right? He jumped down and began walking toward them, step by step. Zhou scoffed. Looking for revenge? Then go fight the zombies. Not us. His eyes narrowed. But after the way you curled up last night, I doubt you have the guts. Lin Ji's face twisted in rage. You bastard. I'll kill you right here. Zhou calmly rested his hand on the hilt of his sword, a cold smile forming. Go ahead. Try me. But just as the tension peaked, Lin Ji suddenly turned the gun and fired at Xiaoxia. Without warning, the gunshot rang out and she collapsed, blood spreading across her shirt. Zhou froze, eyes wide. Lin Ji, he roared, you sick bastard. Lin Ji burst into laughter. That's more like it. Now you're feeling it, huh? He grinned cruelly. If I want to hurt you, I'll go after the ones you care about most. Lin Ji smirked maliciously. Oh, and I almost forgot to tell you. I saw your brother get bitten last night. You didn't have the guts to finish him off, did you? So I did you a favor and blew up the whole mine. Zhou froze as if struck by lightning. In a blink, his eyes turned red with rage. He drew his sword and charged at Lin Ji. The latter smiled wickedly. Yes, idiot. That's exactly what I wanted. As he raised the gun to shoot, a dark shadow shot out from the forest, sank its teeth into Lin Ji's arm, and ripped it off. Lin Ji fell to the ground, screaming in agony, squealing like a pig being slaughtered. As he stared at the creature in horror, Zhou stopped abruptly, stunned by the sudden chaos. His eyes narrowed. That's a tear of the zombie wolf. Meanwhile, back in the village, Xiaoxia was sitting on the roof, legs swinging as she grumbled. Why hasn't second brother come back yet? Suddenly, loud knocks echoed from the front gate. A voice shouted urgently, Is Zhou home? Open up. Xiaoxia peeked over the door. Brother Guan. Uncle? No, my brother isn't here. What's going on? Huang suddenly pointed to the mountain ridge and shouted, Look over there. Xiaoxia quickly raised her phone and turned on the flashlight, aiming it into the distance. When the beam of light hit the slope, her eyes widened completely, frozen in place. Coming down the slopes, swarms of zombies moved like a black tide toward the village. Meanwhile, Lin Ji was lying on the ground, bleeding, nearly unconscious, and he wondered if this was how he was going to die. The zombie wolf slowly turned its bloodshot eyes toward Zhu. Instinct took over, and he screamed, This isn't good. He found me. With a deafening howl, the creature charged straight at him. Zhou dodged to the side with lightning reflexes, slashing his blade across the creature's chest as it passed. Blood burst out violently. The zombie wolf crashed to the ground, howling in pain. Zhou caught his breath, eyes fixed on the wounded creature. Great, night is falling. His power isn't at full strength. But if it gets dark, Xiaoxia and I won't stand a chance. We need to end this before sunset. Suddenly, a chorus of deep, guttural howls echoed through the forest. Zhou froze. But zombies? Then he understood. His expression darkened. No, this is a horde. His gaze turned toward the distance, where a wave of undead was advancing through the trees. Wait, wasn't the village chief the origin? But he's already dead. Then, what about the bats? Could they be the true cause? Just as Zhou connected the dots, the zombie wolf lunged at him with a blood-curdling roar. Its claws came down with brutal force, trying to tear him to pieces. At the very last moment, Zhou twisted his body, narrowly avoiding a fatal strike. His heart pounded. How is it still this fast? It should be dying. Then he noticed the wound he had just opened on the creature's chest was closing up, healing rapidly, right before his eyes, before he could react. The creature opened its massive jaws and charged again, trying to shred him. Meanwhile, deep in the cave where Zhou Ming had been buried, the rubble still trembled from the recent explosion. A deep rumble echoed louder and louder through the tunnel. Then, boom, an explosion of force sent rocks flying in all directions. Moments later, Zhou Ming emerged from the smoke. His body radiated a terrifying crimson glow. A cold, twisted smile formed on his face. Back on the bridge, Bing Bing stared, horrified, as the zombie wolf charged at Zhou. Her voice trembled as she whispered, No, please, no. Just as the zombie wolf closed its jaws around Zhou, a strange red aura erupted from his body. A fiery glow pulsed like living energy beneath his skin. Power surged through his body, raw, wild, uncontrollable. It was as if his entire being was burning and being reborn. With a guttural growl, Zhou drove his fist straight into the creature's jaw. The zombie wolf, completely caught off guard, was sent flying backward by the devastating blow. It let out a tortured scream, blood spraying from its mouth as it hit the ground. Zhou didn't give it a chance to recover. His eyes burned red as he advanced, raising his blade high. With a single brutal strike, he cleaved the creature in two. When the dust settled, Bingbing stared at the blood-soaked silhouette in disbelief. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Zhao." He turned to her with a soft smile. "Yeah, I'm here," he said, collapsing weakly to the ground. Bingbing gave a faint smile. "Haha, as long as you're okay." Bingbing looked at the split zombie wolf, then at Chu, who remained calm and steady. She let out a quiet laugh. "You're ridiculously strong, and somehow that didn't even surprise me. Maybe because, deep down," she thought, "I've already started to believe he can fix anything." Zhou looked at his own hands. The power flowing through his body hadn't faded yet. It pulsed, wild yet controlled. Where did this come from? Could it be an awakening? But something didn't add up. In his past life, no one awakened without a crystal core, and he'd never used one. He snapped out of the trance, his eyes locking on the swarm of undead closing in on them. "Now's not the time to talk," he said sharply. "We need to move. We're surrounded. If we stay here, we're dead." Noticing her leg injury, he stepped forward. "You can't run like that. I'll carry you. Just hold on tight. It's going to be a rough ride." Gritting her teeth, Bingbing tried to stand. Her face was pale with pain, but she nodded firmly. "Okay." The zombie horde roared like a crashing wave. Their snarls sliced through the air as they approached. Zhao didn't hesitate. He threw Bingbing onto his back and ran toward the village with everything he had. The outline of the village appeared in sight, but the undead were closing in fast. Their footsteps sounded like death drums. He looked back, calculating quickly. Too many. Even if I manage to beat them, I can't protect Bingbing. She'll get hurt. As he clenched his teeth and prepared to keep running, a loud roar echoed in the distance. The vehicle charged through the chaos like a missile. It was a heavily modified off-road truck, spewing massive fireballs from the rear exhaust, mowing down zombies like paper targets. As it reached Zhao, the driver made a sharp turn. The back end swung out, releasing a wall of flames that hurled the undead into the air, burning them to ashes in an instant. The truck skidded to a stop, and the driver's window rolled down, revealing Zhou's father with a cigarette dangling from his lips. With a big grin, he shouted, "Zhao, Daddy's here to save the day." In the passenger seat, Xiao Yang waved excitedly, a flame launcher ready for action.